The sky was alive with thunder, not the calm, distant rumble of a storm, but the explosive, intimate roar of war. Engines screamed, wings sliced through clouds like knives, and the air shimmered with the heat of tracer rounds. Up here, thousands of feet above the earth, ordinary rules dissolved. Every maneuver, every flick of a joystick could mean survival or death. For the German Luftwaffe pilots of 1943, this was their theater, their crucible. They had trained for years, studied every Allied plane, memorized every formation, and rehearsed countless tactics. They believed they understood the machines that fought against them, the Spitfires, the Hurricanes, the bombers lumbering across Europe, but nothing could have prepared them for what came next. It began as just another patrol over the sun-bleached fields of northern France. The pilots were confident. They scanned the horizon, calculating angles, predicting trajectories. Their minds, trained to anticipate the enemy, were like finely tuned instruments. Then, from the haze of clouds and sunlight, a new presence emerged, a P-38 Lightning. Its twin fuselages gleamed, catching the sunlight like a warning beacon. But it was not the plane's appearance that startled them. It was the attack. From the first second, it defied expectation. One German pilot later recalled how it seemed impossible, like a ghost that could exist in two places at once. The P-38 approached, and the Luftwaffe pilot thought he had predicted its angle. But another salvo came from the opposite flank simultaneously. How could a single aircraft coordinate attacks from two directions? How could it strike with such precision, such audacity without warning? The P-38 was no ordinary fighter. Its twin-boom design, revolutionary for its time, gave it unmatched speed and maneuverability. Its central nacelle housed a concentrated nose of firepower, machine guns and cannons aligned with lethal precision. While other planes banked and rolled, trying to chase a target, the P-38 seemed to bend the rules of physics, slicing through the sky with a confidence that unsettled even the most seasoned German ace. Above, the sky was chaos. Smoke trails crisscrossed like wild threads in a tapestry of death. Pilots twisted in impossible arcs, firing, dodging, praying. And in the middle of it all, this one aircraft, like an enigma in steel and fire, seemed untouchable. It attacked with a rhythm that no textbook could explain, a timing that no human mind could anticipate. For the German pilots, that first encounter was more than surprise. It was shock. Every principle they had relied on, every calculation of angles, speed, and trajectory had failed. They realized in that suspended moment above the earth that the sky had changed. A new predator ruled the clouds, and it could strike from two sides at once, leaving destruction in its wake. And so the legend of the P-38, Lightning, began. Not as just a machine, but as a master of the skies, rewriting the rules of aerial combat in a war that demanded constant adaptation, courage, and unflinching resolve. In the theater of the clouds, this was a revelation. The most dangerous battles were not just fought with bullets, but with the unseen mathematics of anticipation, maneuver, and sheer audacity. The story of the P-38 Lightning begins not in the sky, but in a drawing room. Amid sketches, calculations, and debates, Lockheed's engineers, led by the visionary Clarence Kelly Johnson, dared to challenge the very idea of what a fighter aircraft could be. While the world expected sleek single fuselage designs, they conceived something extraordinary, a twin-boom aircraft with a central cockpit, a configuration that seemed more science fiction than military necessity. When it first rolled out, the P-38 was met with skepticism, even ridicule. Critics called it awkward, ungainly, and unproven. "It looks like two planes joined at the hip," some said, their laughter echoing the disbelief of seasoned pilots who had spent years mastering conventional designs. But beneath that unconventional exterior lay a machine built for dominance, a predator shaped for the skies of World War II. The twin booms were more than aesthetic oddities. They housed powerful Allison engines, capable of propelling the plane faster than nearly any contemporary fighter. Between them, the central fuselage held a cockpit that offered unprecedented visibility, giving the pilot a commanding view of the battlefield. But it was the nose that made the Lightning truly lethal. Concentrated in a single point were 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, aimed with surgical precision. Unlike wing-mounted guns that required careful convergence, this arrangement meant every shot the P-38 fired was deadly accurate, instantly threatening anyone caught in its crosshairs. Range was another revelation. While most fighters of the era struggled to escort bombers over long distances, the P-38 could travel farther, faster, and return with fuel to spare. It was a Predator built not just for combat, but for endurance, able to chase, hunt, and strike deep behind enemy lines. Its twin engines provided redundancy, giving pilots a lifeline in moments that would otherwise have been fatal. And yet, its genius lay not only in engineering, but in psychological warfare. Luftwaffe veterans, confident in their training and familiar with the predictable patterns of Allied fighters, were suddenly confronted with a machine that refused to follow known rules. Speed, firepower, range, and maneuverability. The Lightning combined all these in a form no one had expected, a living embodiment of surprise. The P-38 was not just an airplane, it was an idea made tangible. A bold, radical statement that in war, evolution often comes from the daring few who refuse to accept the limitations of tradition. Those who would face it in the skies of Europe would learn, often too late, that underestimating this twin-engine Predator was a mistake that could, and often did, cost their lives. In the coming battles, the P-38 would not just participate, it would redefine aerial warfare, proving that innovation, audacity, and precision could turn an odd-looking fighter into a legend feared across continents. In the early years of the Second World War, the skies above Europe belonged to Germany. The Luftwaffe was more than an air force. It was a symbol of precision, strategy, and technological superiority. Its pilots were the elite, carefully selected and rigorously trained, entrusted with machines that were marvels of engineering, the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Focke-Wulf 190. These fighters were nimble, fast and deadly, their engines growling like predators on the hunt. For German aces, the air war was almost a chessboard. Every move was calculated, every maneuver a combination of instinct and mathematics. They had studied Allied tactics, dissected formations, memorized flight patterns. The early blitzkriegs had reinforced their confidence. Poland, France, and the Low Countries had fallen beneath the synchronized roar of their wings and guns. In the air, German pilots believed they were untouchable. The Bf-109s could climb faster, turn tighter, and dive with greater speed. The FW-190s brought power and versatility, capable of intercepting bombers or dogfighting with equal efficiency. This dominance bred a sense of inevitability, a quiet arrogance. The Allies were clever, certainly, but clever could be anticipated, and anticipated could be defeated. German pilots had grown used to controlling the skies, to dictating the terms of engagement. They had faced almost every type of fighter the Allies could field, planes that could outmaneuver them in some conditions, perhaps, but none that could truly challenge the Luftwaffe's supremacy. And then the contrails appeared. At first, they were subtle streaks across the horizon, almost indistinct among the clouds. A pair here, a lone speck there. But there was something different about them, something the experienced pilots could not immediately classify. Their formations were tight, but their movement was unconventional. They approached with precision yet unpredictability. The Germans had seen Spitfires, Hurricanes, even Mustangs, but these planes moved in a way that seemed to defy expectation. The Bf-109 pilot squinted, tracking one of the streaks as it drew closer. He executed a standard attack pattern, expecting the usual evasive maneuvers, the predictable dives and rolls. But the plane refused the script. It approached from angles that shouldn't have been possible, delivered fire with uncanny accuracy, and vanished before retaliation could be effective. A subtle but chilling realization spread among the German formations. The skies were no longer entirely theirs. The rules had changed, though the enemy was still unseen, still a phantom until it struck. That unseen element, the lightning-fast, unpredictable, almost prescient P-38, was rewriting every expectation the Luftwaffe had relied on. Confidence gave way to confusion, and confusion to fear. The pilots had mastered aerial combat, yet here was a new variable they could not control, and in war control is survival. Each contrail was a reminder. The storm of steel and fire above Europe was not just a contest of machines or skill. It was a contest of perception, strategy, and anticipation. In the end, Germany's dominance had been absolute only until innovation intervened. The Luftwaffe had been the undisputed ruler of the clouds, but now, a new predator had entered the theater, a plane that would force them to rethink everything they thought they knew about aerial warfare. The first encounters were almost farcical. At least, that's what the Luftwaffe pilots thought at the start. They called it the fork-tailed devil, mocking the P-38 Lightning's twin-boom silhouette. Its unusual shape, so different from the sleek lines of a Bf-109 or FW-190, seemed almost cartoonish. German pilots, confident in their mastery of the skies, laughed behind their oxygen masks, certain that this new Allied fighter was more style than substance. But war has a cruel way of shattering assumptions. The P-38 proved that appearances were deceiving. In the early skirmishes over France, and later in the sun-bleached theaters of the Mediterranean, the Lightning revealed capabilities that left experienced aces breathless. Its twin engines roared with relentless power, enabling it to climb faster than any German fighter in its path. Maneuvers that should have allowed a Messerschmitt to shake it off proved futile. The Lightning matched them, countered them, and often turned the tables in a fraction of a second. Even more astonishing was its firepower. In a single concentrated burst, the nose-mounted machine guns and 20mm cannon could shred wings, fuselages, and entire formations with terrifying efficiency. German pilots found themselves stunned, unable to anticipate where the next volley would strike. They had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes, nimble and clever in their own right, but none carried the Lightning's blend of precision, power, and audacity. And then, there was endurance. Dogfights that once felt like a sprint became grueling tests of stamina. A P-38 could sustain speed and altitude longer than any Bf-109, shadowing retreats or chasing attackers across miles of open sky. Escape routes, the lifelines that had always guaranteed a chance at survival, vanished as the Lightning pursued relentlessly, almost methodically. For the first time, confidence turned to disbelief. Experienced German pilots, accustomed to reading the enemy like a book, found themselves in a nightmare of calculations and instinct. No diagram, no textbook, no prior engagement had prepared them for an opponent who could outclimb, outgun, and outlast them all at once. The laughter that greeted the fork-tailed silhouette gave way to tense silence, broken only by the roar of engines and the crack of gunfire. It was here, amid clouds streaked with smoke and tracer fire, that the P-38 earned its fearsome reputation. It was not just an aircraft. It was a statement, a disruptive force that refused to conform to the rules of aerial combat. And for the pilots who first faced it, the lesson was stark and immediate. In war, the familiar can deceive, the underestimated can dominate, and the most dangerous threats are often the ones you never saw coming. In the skies of Europe, dogfights were a deadly dance of speed, skill, and timing. Pilots learned to anticipate movement, to read angles, to calculate distance and velocity in fractions of a second. But then came the P-38 Lightning, a plane that turned every rule they had mastered on its head. At the heart of its terror was its twin-engine design, a radical departure from the single fuselage fighters that dominated the era. Each engine roared independently, giving the aircraft a stability and speed profile that was astonishing. Combined with a central nacelle housing a nose bristling with 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, the Lightning became a precision instrument of destruction. Every bullet it fired hit exactly where it was aimed. There was no need to adjust for convergence, no guessing the trajectory from the wings. To the German pilots, this concentrated firepower felt as if two planes were attacking simultaneously. In the first encounters, the effect was almost surreal. Luftwaffe aces would maneuver to evade one threat, only to find the Lightning cutting across an angle they had assumed was safe. It swooped in from above, then leveled out, then darted from the side they hadn't even noticed. Survivors would later recount the same disbelief. It came at us from both sides. We couldn't believe one plane could do that. For those who had spent years perfecting dogfighting techniques, the experience was disorienting, humbling, and terrifying. The Lightning's approach was calculated but appeared chaotic. Pilots described it as a shadow moving with uncanny prescience, striking with the accuracy of a predator, and disappearing before retaliation could be mounted. Unlike conventional fighters, which were limited by turn radius, climb rate, or engine power, the P-38 exploited its twin engines to push limits in every direction. Dive, climb, roll, and repeat. The maneuver left enemy pilots scrambling to calculate vectors that no human mind could anticipate. Even when the German fighters attempted counterattacks, the results were catastrophic. One squadron described a single P-38 dismantling 3 aircraft in rapid succession, switching positions so quickly that survivors initially assumed multiple planes were involved. Each engagement left a lasting psychological mark. Pilots became hypervigilant, second-guessing every angle, every assumption about the airspace around them. In the theater of combat, hesitation meant death, and the Lightning forced hesitation with every pass. The twin booms, the concentrated nose guns, the unprecedented speed, they were not simply innovations. They were instruments of psychological warfare. German pilots could no longer rely on patterns, formations, or conventional tactics. Every sortie became a confrontation with the unknown, a test of reflexes against a machine that seemed to bend the rules of reality itself. By the end of these initial encounters, the phrase double attack had entered Luftwaffe lore. It was more than a tactic, it was a revelation. A single aircraft could dominate the sky, strike from multiple directions, and leave even the most seasoned fighter pilots questioning their skill, their training, and their survival. The P-38 Lightning had not just arrived in the war, it had rewritten the rules of engagement. And nothing would ever be the same. War is a theater of roles, and in the skies over Europe and the Mediterranean, one of the most dramatic reversals of fate occurred in the summer of 1943. For years, the Luftwaffe had been the apex predator, stalking bomber formations with ruthless efficiency. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs swooped from above, diving with calculated precision, and Allied pilots learned quickly that survival meant cunning, discipline, and luck. But when the P-38 Lightning appeared in force, the balance shifted, and the hunters suddenly became the hunted. The P-38 was uniquely suited for this reversal. Its twin engines provided speed and redundancy, allowing pilots to push beyond the limits that would ground conventional fighters. Its remarkable range meant it could accompany bombers deep into enemy territory, escorting them farther than any other fighter could manage. But it was more than endurance that made the Lightning deadly. It was the combination of range, firepower, and tactics honed to lethal perfection. P-38 units didn't just engage the Luftwaffe. They anticipated, predicted, and dominated. Teams of Lightnings would patrol the skies in formations designed to cover every angle. As German fighters approached, P-38s would split, flank, and converge with terrifying coordination. The nose-mounted guns ensured that every burst counted, every maneuver was a threat, and retreat became an illusion. For the first time, German pilots found themselves maneuvering defensively, reacting to the relentless strategy of an enemy they could neither intimidate nor outmaneuver. Historian later described it as a shadow war, in which the hunters were stalked by a force that combined technology and tactics with near-prescient timing. Luftwaffe pilots, confident in their training and accustomed to dominance, were bewildered by the P-38's ability to strike, withdraw, and reappear with relentless precision. Escape routes they had relied on for years, climb above, dive below, circle wide, no longer guaranteed safety. Every action was met with an equally adaptive counter, a demonstration that aerial superiority was no longer automatic. The psychological impact was profound. Pilots who had once entered the skies with a sense of control began to approach each mission with caution, hesitation, and fear. Their confidence, painstakingly earned over years of experience, eroded with every encounter. The Lightning had introduced uncertainty, a variable that could not be fully calculated. And in war, uncertainty can be as lethal as any cannon. By turning the tide in bomber escort and interception missions, the P-38 did more than defend, it imposed dominance. The hunters had become the hunted, and history was witnessing a reversal few could have predicted. In this new dynamic, skill alone was no longer enough. Survival required respect for innovation, adaptability, and the unseen advantages of an aircraft designed to exploit every weakness. In the clouds above Europe and the Mediterranean, a lesson was etched into memory. No empire of air power lasts forever, and the most dangerous predator is often the one you fail to see coming. The P-38 Lightning had not just entered the battle, it had rewritten the rules of pursuit, strategy, and survival. Every great weapon needs a wielder, and the P-38 Lightning found its champions in a new generation of American pilots, men who combined skill, courage, and instinct with an aircraft that seemed almost designed to amplify their abilities. Among them, Richard Bong and Thomas Maguire became legends. Their names whispered with awe, both by their comrades and by the Luftwaffe they faced. A Midwesterner with a quiet intensity, approached the sky with precision and calculation. In the cockpit of his Lightning, he became more than a pilot. He became a force that could anticipate, maneuver, and strike with the efficiency of a predator. Maguire, equally daring, pushed the Lightning to its limits, exploiting its speed, climb rate, and concentrated firepower in ways that German aces had never imagined. Together and with other P-38 pilots, They transformed the aircraft into an extension of their skill, turning its radical design into a battlefield advantage that few could counter. What set these pilots apart was not only their technical mastery but also their ability to leverage the Lightning's unique features. The twin-engine layout allowed aggressive climbing and diving maneuvers without fear of losing control. The concentrated nose-mounted guns gave instantaneous, deadly accuracy, removing the need for the complex aiming calculations required by traditional wing-mounted weaponry. And the long-range capability allowed them to dictate where battles were fought, often choosing when and where to engage. In essence, the aircraft amplified human ingenuity and courage, allowing even relatively inexperienced pilots to achieve extraordinary results. For the Luftwaffe, this was disorienting. German veterans, who had grown accustomed to dominating skies across Europe, now faced Americans who seemed to anticipate every maneuver, react faster than expected, and strike with lethal precision. Confidence, honed over countless engagements, faltered in the face of Lightning pilots who combined audacity with technical mastery. It was no longer a contest of machine versus machine. It was a contest of skill magnified by innovation. Bong and Maguire did not merely survive, they excelled, achieving victories that seemed almost impossible. Their feats became case studies in the synergy between human brilliance and technological advantage. Each dogfight left a lasting impression on both sides. For Americans, it was the exhilaration of mastery. For Germans, it was the dawning realization that their supremacy was no longer guaranteed. The P-38 had turned ordinary pilots into ace-makers, capable of rewriting the balance of power in the skies. By combining innovation with expertise, the Lightning and its pilots shattered the illusion of invincibility, proving that even the most seasoned adversaries could be undone when mastery meets ingenuity. In the skies above Europe and the Pacific, confidence was no longer enough. Only skill, courage, and the right machine could dictate survival. For the German pilots who first faced the P-38 Lightning, the encounter was a jolt to the senses, a violent recalibration of expectation and reality. They had been trained to dominate, to calculate angles and speeds with precision, to anticipate the limitations of enemy aircraft. They expected clumsy twin-engine bombers, slow and ponderous, easy to target and destroy. What they found instead was a speed demon, a machine that struck with the accuracy of a sharpshooter and the unpredictability of a phantom. One Luftwaffe ace later recalled his first engagement in vivid terms. "I thought I knew what a twin-engine plane could do. I thought I could outmaneuver it. But then it appeared, the forked tail cutting through the clouds, and I realized, too late, that I was outmatched. Every instinct I had failed me. The P-38's approach was relentless yet precise. Its twin engines roared like a predator closing in, while its concentrated nose guns delivered fire with deadly accuracy. For the German pilots, there was no room for error, no margin for miscalculation. The terror was compounded by the Lightning's radical design. The twin booms in central cockpit, once considered awkward or experimental, allowed the P-38 to climb faster, dive harder, and maintain stability at speeds that would spin most fighters out of control. Its visibility meant pilots could anticipate maneuvers that would normally catch them by surprise. Every pass felt like a trap, every angle a potential death sentence. Accounts from surviving Luftwaffe pilots speak to a psychological shift as sharp as the physical threat. Laughter at the fork-tailed devil turned to disbelief, disbelief to panic, and panic to paralyzing fear. "It was like fighting two planes at once," one veteran said, shivering at the memory. "I'd roll one way to evade, and it was already there, firing from the opposite side. There was no safety, no refuge, only the Lightning." Even for the most seasoned aces, arrogance dissolved under the weight of this new reality. Dogfights that had once been contests of skill and calculation became frantic tests of survival. The Lightning did not merely challenge tactics. It undermined confidence, introduced doubt, and forced pilots to confront the terrifying unknown. It was a lesson in humility, imposed not by philosophy or diplomacy, but by speed, precision, and raw innovation. By the end of these engagements, the reputation of the P-38 was cemented in the minds of those who faced it. It was not just a plane. It was a terror in the sky, a disruptor of norms, and a reminder that superiority is never guaranteed. For the German pilots, each sighting of the forked tail was a moment of reckoning, a confrontation with the invisible mathematics of anticipation and the brutal consequences of underestimating ingenuity. In the cockpit, fear had found a new form. and its name was Lightning. The P-38. Lightning's dominance was not the result of chance or luck. It was a deliberate triumph of engineering, innovation, and strategic foresight. At first glance, its radical design, the twin booms, central cockpit, and elongated fuselage, seemed unconventional, almost awkward. Yet each feature was a calculated solution to the demands of modern aerial warfare, a hidden edge that would redefine expectations and confound even the most seasoned adversaries. Long range was among the Lightning's greatest advantages. While conventional fighters struggled to escort bombers across the vast theaters of Europe and the Pacific, the P-38 could accompany them deep into enemy territory, extending the reach of the Allied air campaign. This endurance allowed pilots to dictate the terms of engagement, striking at the enemy on their own schedule and retreating only when tactically advantageous. In essence, the Lightning turned distance, a constant limitation in air combat, into a strategic weapon. Turbo superchargers were another critical innovation. By compensating for the thinning air at high altitudes, they maintained engine performance where most fighters would falter. The P-38 could climb, dive, and maneuver with a consistency that other aircraft simply could not match, exploiting vertical space in ways that left German pilots scrambling to react. Its twin engines were more than redundancy. They were an amplification of capability, allowing it to push the boundaries of speed, acceleration, and tactical maneuvering simultaneously. The concentrated nose-mounted firepower transformed engagement dynamics. With 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, every shot was deadly precise. Unlike wing-mounted guns, which required constant convergence adjustments, the P-38's central armament meant that pilots could fire accurately at any range, delivering devastating strikes in the opening seconds of combat. In dogfights, this precision became a psychological weapon. German pilots learned that hesitation or misjudgment was often fatal, and once that fear took root, mistakes multiplied. Yet the hidden edge of the P-38 was not purely technical. It was also strategic and psychological. The Allies had built an adaptable system, pilots trained to exploit innovation, engineers encouraged to challenge convention, and commanders willing to embrace untested tactics. Axis forces, in contrast, had become rigid, relying on established doctrine, confident in their prior successes. The P-38 exploited this rigidity, proving that flexibility, creativity, and anticipation could overwhelm even superior numbers or experienced adversaries. The lesson resonates far beyond the battlefield. The most dangerous threats and the most transformative innovations often emerge where expectation meets audacity. The P-38 Lightning succeeded not because it conformed to assumptions, but because it broke them, turning speed, firepower, and ingenuity into a new paradigm. In the skies, as in life, the unseen advantage, the factor no one accounted for, can redefine everything. Innovation breaks expectations. Anticipation becomes survival, and mastery is achieved not merely through strength, but through vision. The Lightning's legacy was clear. Those who dare to challenge convention, who build for what others cannot see, hold the power to change the rules of engagement. Its hidden edge was not just a matter of design, it was a lesson in adaptability, foresight, and the enduring impact of human ingenuity. The P-38 Lightning story does not end with the last dogfight or the final sortie. Its legacy extends far beyond the skies of Europe, the deserts of North Africa, or the islands of the Pacific. The fork-tailed devil became more than a machine. It became a symbol of innovation, audacity, and the transformative power of imagination in the crucible of war. By the time the war reached its later stages, the P-38 had earned a fearsome reputation. German pilots, once confident and unshakable, recounted encounters that bordered on disbelief. The Lightning had introduced a psychological shock that reshaped air combat. Its unique design, concentrated firepower, speed, and endurance forced adversaries to rethink everything they believed about aerial superiority. For the Allies, it represented opportunity, a platform that empowered pilots like Richard Bong and Thomas Maguire to achieve extraordinary feats, turning ordinary engagements into decisive victories. But the impact of the P-38 was not limited to tactical victories. It was a lesson in foresight, adaptability, and the courage to challenge conventional wisdom. Engineers at Lockheed refused to accept what worked in other aircraft. They questioned assumptions about speed, maneuverability, and firepower, daring to imagine a fighter that could operate in multiple theaters, strike with precision, and outlast opponents. Their vision transformed theory into reality, turning skepticism into a weapon that reshaped the strategic landscape. The psychological element was just as significant as the technological. In war, perception is often as decisive as firepower. German aces had been conditioned to dominate, to calculate angles and distances, to anticipate moves based on known patterns. The P-38 shattered that confidence, introducing an element that could not be fully predicted. It demonstrated that even the most experienced, disciplined adversaries are vulnerable when confronted with innovation they cannot comprehend. Fear, in this case, was not a byproduct. It was part of the strategic advantage. The broader lesson extends far beyond the aerial battles of World War II. History is full of examples where the underestimated, the unconventional, or the audacious have rewritten outcomes. The lightning reminds us that imagination is a weapon as sharp as any cannon. The unseen advantage, the daring departure from convention, often changes the course of events. In engineering, strategy, and human endeavor alike, those willing to break expectations wield power disproportionate to their size or number. Ultimately, the P-38 Lightning endures as a testament to what can be achieved when vision meets courage. It is a story of human ingenuity, of minds willing to challenge norms, and of the lessons learned when conventional wisdom collides with innovation. The fork-tailed devil left more than smoke trails and wrecked aircraft behind. It left a legacy of inspiration, reminding the world that in any endeavor, the power of imagination can redefine what is possible. In the annals of history, the P-38 stands not only as a machine of war, but as a symbol of daring, a lesson in adaptation, and a proof that the most underestimated designs can change the course of destiny.